we'll just kick it off. And
can I just say, as we get started, you know, we are so lucky to have the Speaker and Senator Roberts representing Summit County. It is not in every county that you would find the county and our state house coming together to answer everyone's questions, and they are tireless advocates for everything we all care about. So I just wanted to personally thank them both for taking the time to be with us today.
Right back at
you. So, one of the biggest questions that we have that comes around the county, we just went through a property tax reassessment. We're all talking about what happened to our property tax bills, what the county's strategy is, what might be happening at the State House and legislatively. I don't know, Tamara, do you want to kick it off?
Oh, that's nice. Let's kick it off with the easiest topic we can talk about.
Let's get it out of the way.
I don't know, you know, I think property tax is actually a great topic for us today because it is the intersection of what happens at the State House in terms of how the state sets the assessment rate, and then what happens locally in terms of our local mill and also the valuations of our property. I will be the first to say that I know, as a single mom, the valuation increase this past cycle was painful. It was painful for everybody. It was unanticipated. And I would tell you that Colorado still has the lowest residential property tax rate in the nation. And in some ways that's great, right? It actually is one thing that makes Colorado more affordable. In other ways though, it means that government, particularly local governments, who are the entities in Colorado that really survive on property taxes, it's made our jobs very difficult. Figuring out how we fund law enforcement, roads, the coroner, human services, which is a statutory responsibility of counties. The many, many things that we have to do has gotten increasingly difficult. And for Summit County government, we saw a huge decrease after the recession in property tax values in 2007. And really, we had just caught up to where we were pre-recession. And so that meant that we, when I started as a commissioner, had a 50% vacancy rate because we couldn't afford to pay our employees what it actually cost to live here. You know, the property tax valuation, everybody wants to know where the money goes. And the truth is, about a third of your dollars went to the county. About a third of your dollars, I'll let the Speaker talk about this because she's an expert, but a third of your dollars end up with the state and the school district and that sort of the way their funding works. And then a third went to the 42 special districts in Summit County. So that's your water, your sewer, your fire folks, your first responders. And so when you really look at the amount of money that came to Summit County, I know it feels like a lot, but when you weigh it against inflation, when you weigh it against us catching up, it really isn't that much money in the grand scheme of things for all of the services that we promised to you all to deliver. Regardless, it's still painful. And it is the cliff, I think, that has created the most amount of pain. So I'm going to hand it over to the Speaker and Senator Roberts to talk about their part of it. But I also hope folks will keep in mind that we have done 3 in the past 2 years, reduction in the assessment rate, and that saves taxpayers money. And also at Summit County government, we have a natural float. So many of the dollars that we collect are actually approved by you all. And when values go up, the mill goes down. And that means that our revenue actually equalizes. We were not one of the districts in Summit County that increased our mill. We did let it naturally float down. And I think our commitment here is to continue to do whatever we can do to offer you efficient local government and mitigate those increases as we move forward.
Wow.
What she said.
Yeah, what she said. That's right. That's right. Let me take a step back and offer a landscape from the state perspective. Many of you may remember in 2020 we repealed the Gallagher Amendment. That was an amendment that forced a ratio between non-residential rates and residential rates. And had Gallagher still been in effect as of today, our local governments, our school districts, would have received significant cuts over the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm happy that we took that step in 2020. The challenge is we didn't replace, when the Gallagher Amendment was repealed, we didn't replace it with a permanent approach to taxation in the state, and I wish we would have. Since that time, the state has been delivering reductions in property tax through the one mechanism that we can, and that is the assessment rate. In 2022, we took that assessment rate from 7.15 down to 7.06. We had to backfill local governments and school districts by almost 500 million when we did that. Since then, we've been lowering property taxes by tweaking that assessment rate and doing a couple of other things by exempting part of the value of someone's home ownership. You know, the crisis of the cost of living, affordability in the state has been top of mind for us at the state. And certainly home ownership, rental rates are a part of that equation. Last fall, after the failure of Proposition HH, which had been a proposal for long-term property taxation, the governor called a special session together. And during that special session in November, we passed a reduction in property taxes. We provided rental assistance for those who were in a crisis not being able to afford their rent anymore. We passed an earned income tax credit for low-income working families to ensure that we were doing more than just focusing on property tax. But that was only a part of that package. The one other thing we did, which was, I think, probably the best thing of that whole session, was we put together a property tax commission. A group of experts, local government leaders. Commissioner Pogue was my appointment from Summit County to represent the voices of our Mountain West. And we had more, so all of you know, Republicans, more Republicans on this commission than Democrats, because we were looking for the experts, not partisanship. We wanted a solution to the challenges we're facing in property taxation. Based on their recommendations, we passed a bill this year, Senate Bill 233. 92 out of 100 legislators voted to approve that measure. It provides responsible property tax cuts for residents and business owners. It provides backfill for our public schools at $400 million this year and at an amount ongoing. The state has made the commitment we won't see any reduction in school funding. And it does mean that local governments and special districts are going to have to embrace a lower tax assessment rate even in the rise of property value increases. The last thing I would offer is that our rural resorts have really been hit the hardest with those increases. The San Luis Valley saw an average increase of only 10 to 11% in property values. They were probably the lowest in the state. Our particular county, the highest. We're in the highest region of property valuation increases. So I want you to know that we're going to continue to evaluate the impacts of this bill we just passed. I am strongly opposed to a couple of the ballot measures you'll see this fall. Should they pass, the state will be on the hook for nearly 20% of our entire budget to backfill local government schools with the passage of these measures. That means that while we'll be backfilling schools, we'll be cutting them on the state side. We'll be cutting higher education. We'll be cutting Medicaid services and other human services safety net programs. So look forward to the conversation and certainly want to hear your questions. But I am really proud of the work we've done so far. I hear the pain and frustration that we haven't been able to do more, but know that it has come from, you know, a great deal of work and really a focus on responsible governance. How can we reduce property taxation and maintain services? So thanks.
Great, Dylan, any?
So, what she said. No, that was an excellent recap of what's been happening at the state legislative level as far as property taxes. I supported Senate Bill 233, was very happy with the bipartisan collaborative approach that bill brought. It was largely based on the work that Commissioner Pogue and the other members of the Property Tax Commission worked on for many months. It provides real, meaningful relief in your property tax bill that would not happen if that bill hadn't passed. And as the speaker mentioned, 92 out of 100 legislators voted for it, broad bipartisan support. Some of the most conservative, some of the most progressive joined together to pass that bill. It's going to result in at least $70,000 of savings on your assessment and a permanent reduction in the assessment rates that wouldn't have happened if that bill hadn't passed. One other thing to note that we did on property taxes this year is about the senior homestead exemption. This is a relief that we give to seniors in Colorado, $100,000 off of your valuation if you're a qualifying senior. There had been frustration with that previously that it was not portable, that if you as a senior needed to move to downsize or move closer to family elsewhere, that you would lose your exemption and you'd start your 10-year clock over because you have to live in your home for at least 10 years before you can qualify. We made that portable. So now seniors in Colorado who qualify for the exemption can downsize to a different home, move to a different town, and still will qualify for that important relief on their property tax bill.
What age does that start at?
65.
But it's still 10 years.
You have to have lived in your home for 10 years, so starting at age 55, if you are in the same home that you were, but now you can move across the state and still qualify for that exemption.
And I think the 15th of this month was the deadline to apply for this year.
Right, and you apply through your local county assessor. They can get you all the information on that, on how to apply in each county.
Do you guys want to take questions on topics as we go, or do you want to wait to open it up afterwards?
Whatever is easy.
Yes,
All right,
whatever folks would like to do.
we'll go ahead and take some questions on this topic. Sir?
Well, first of all, I solved the problem by moving in with my girlfriend and selling my house. We know a year in advance what the assessment's going to be. Why didn't we start a year earlier on addressing the problem?
You want to go first?
Sure. I guess a couple of things I would say. We've really been working on this issue since the repeal of Gallagher 2020. We've been trying to find a long-term solution. We did kind of 2-year solutions as we were engaging with leaders in business and local governments to try and find that right package. Proposition HH, which was not supported by the voters, most unfortunately, and kind of the irony is that elements of HH are in Senate Bill 233. I think we rushed HH in trying to address the problem without stakeholding enough, listening enough. But regardless, I do think we have been working on it, and that's why the governor called a special session in November to ensure that 2023 property taxes were, that we could provide whatever relief we could, which was $200 million at the time. Thank you for the question, Tom.
And I'll just add, property taxes in Colorado work on a 2-year cycle. So the assessor starts her work a year before you all see your notice. We get that information the same time you get your notice. So there is and then we have to adjust our budgets based on what the legislature has done with the 3 progressive cuts in the valuation rate. And we have to wait from the information for our assessor before we can figure out our budget and then adjust our mill to match all of that. So it is a very complicated process that does take the full 2 years. And I think that's part of why the legislature did come back in a special session and do 001. And it's part of why we were all working so hard on the Property Tax Commission to create something that these guys could pass this past session. So, this conversation has been going on for a while, but it is difficult to make all these moving parts and pieces work together. Other questions on property taxes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate for a second. Alex Beach, I've been in the county for 12 years. Why aren't we talking about using the increase in property taxes to help fund things like affordable housing? Like, I don't feel bad for your windfall that your $1 million house is now worth $2 million in Summit County. And there's a lot of us who've been up here for 15, 20 years that can't afford housing.
Yeah.
Right? And it's becoming harder and harder because your $1 million house is worth $2 million now. All right, so why aren't we using that money to fund more affordable housing up here? Why aren't we building Lake Hill, those of you who have been on the commissioners for a while? Right? Those of us who voted for you into the state Senate and state legislature, multiple election cycles, and we're farther and farther away from being able to afford houses up here. What are we doing about that? Right? If you look around the room, who's able to come on a Thursday afternoon to talk to our elected officials? A lot of wealthy, old retirees, no offense. I would love to be able to retire someone, but I'm never going to be able to. Okay? So the demographic who is not voiced here, because we're out, manning the lifts, we're out running the marina, we're out running the restaurants, the things that make this community have that property values that it does because of the amenities that we provide, and we're not able to live here. So why aren't we discussing that? Nothing else matters.
We actually are. We talk about housing more than we talk about just about anything else. We've been working on, one of our problems is we have not gotten the kind of support from the municipalities that you would think we do. You know, we do some joint projects. We have a great success in Breckenridge. We're starting to have good success on Lake Hill with Frisco. We've had a rough time in Dillon on that Forest Service property, to be honest with you, with things that Dillon thinks that we should provide to them in order to build housing in their community. So it's not like we're not trying. Honest to God, this is probably the biggest thing. At every single meeting, we talk about Nellie's neighborhood, which is going to go in the ground. We talked about Larkspur before that was built. We talked about the Forest Service piece. We talk about Lake Hill every meeting. You know, if I could snap my fingers and make it happen, it would happen. But we have other partners that are less enthusiastic. Thank you. Less enthusiastic about getting some of these projects done and don't necessarily want that many more people near their community or near that road or those kind of people near some communities. So we have a remarkable amount of pushback. Everybody agrees with housing until it's next door to that. And honest to God, that's one of the biggest problems for us as the commission is fighting against that. And it's an ongoing struggle. So I don't disagree with you.
Lake Hill's been on the board for the last 20 years.
Yeah, listen, Lake Hill is a huge deal, and the roads that will come out of Lake Hill, 203's got to be fixed by CDOT prior to Lake Hill getting done. You know, that we have issues with Frisco sanitation. You know, at one point we were going to go ahead and build our own sand plant, which is in the end is pretty dumb. I mean, that just doesn't work. So these things just take a long time. If this was just in unincorporated county and you didn't have to rely on anybody else, Lake Hill would probably be a lot farther along. There's also this massive infrastructure piece with Lake Hill. That's a big part of it. And aside from the money that we spend, the county has a huge statutory obligation for most of the other stuff we do. You know, the sheriff eats up a lot of the budget, roads eat up a lot of the budget. Those are things, in the end, the county, unlike the towns, is an extension of the state. When the state tells us this are the things you need to take care of, health and human services, that's what we take care of. Things like housing, which is number one on the three of ours list, is not really in that statutory obligation, but we do feel that that's one of the most important things that we can do for the community. So
I've been coming to meetings like this for the last decade, and whether it's the town or the county commissioners or state representatives, everyone says, oh, we really appreciate, we want to do this, it's really important, here are all the problems. I haven't seen any of the solutions. Right? And everyone in my demographic is further away from being able to afford housing up here than we were 10 years ago. So I don't want to hear the problems, why it can't be done. What are the solutions?
I will tell you that as the mayor of Breckenridge, I built 1,500 units when I was mayor over 8 years. So, you know, I just started this job 6 months ago. You can't tell me that I haven't been working on housing for virtually my entire political career in Breckenridge. So, and I feel like we have moved along pretty speedily on our project with the U.S. Forest Service. Of course, that's with the federal government, so we have hurdles to jump through. But every day we move the ball a little forward down the line. You know, is it as fast as I'd like? Absolutely not.
No, can I just add, I hear your frustration. There is no single topic that is more important to me as a commissioner than housing. I have spent endless hours on it since I was elected, and my unit count at this point is 400 units. And that doesn't even begin to reflect the amount of time and energy it takes to get one of these projects off the ground. And as a result of that, we as a board have not just been focused on construction and Lake Hill, but we've been focused on a lot of other strategies to help increase units. We have converted 2 hotels into workforce housing. That is the fastest, most economical way we can create workforce housing for our employees. And yes, there's problems with that, right? I don't like the image of our employees living in hotels, and yet our tourists are living in homes, right? There are all kinds of problems there that I acknowledge, and yet it is still the fastest and most economical way to get housing on the ground for folks. We have changed all of our codes to make it easier for private developers to build affordable housing and to incentivize affordable housing and affordable housing developers. We have launched one of the most innovative ADU, accessory dwelling unit programs in the country. We will now pay people and give them plans to build these units in their backyard if they want to, anytime they want to. And they can come into our planning department and get those plans, and in 7 days they can start construction. There are all kinds of strategies that we have engaged in, both in the county, and I do want to call out Councilman Jay Beckerman from Breckenridge, who has worked with us incredibly closely on some of these strategies. We have a buy-down strategy where we buy market rate houses and then resell them to be more affordable to lots of locals. And that is another fast and really affordable strategy. So I think it is frustrating, and I have a lot of friends that have left this community because they cannot afford to live here anymore, and that is a problem that boils down to housing. But the barriers are real, right? The conversation with property taxes and how much revenue we do or don't have relates directly to the conversation about water and sewer and whether or not we actually can get shovels in the ground for Lake Hill. And so in the meantime, we all have to do everything we can do to engage in all of these other strategies that are more economical and get there faster. And that means everyone in this room has a role to play. If your neighbor or somebody comes forward with an application for affordable housing, be the one to stand up at those planning commissions and say, yes, build that housing. Yes, in my backyard, you can build that housing. Because it is often that these projects get slowed down by lawsuits from well-meaning HOAs that just are nervous about having that additional density next to them. So I know it's frustrating when we do meetings in the middle of the day, and I'm grateful to you for taking the time to come. But we also do a lot of meetings in the evening. All of our planning commission meetings are in the evenings, and anyone can come. We have done survey after survey in this community, and we use that data to drive all of the decisions that we make. So, it's not enough, right? It's not enough. If I had a magic wand, I would wave it, and Lake Hill would be filled today. But we are also doing everything we can do to move this conversation forward.
And I would just say, Alex, from the state level, thank you for being here and holding us accountable. You have every right to do that, and I hear you. This is the #1 issue that I work on at the state legislature. I'm sure I can speak for the speaker on that. The state, over the last few years, has become a better partner to our local efforts on this. Over the last few years, the speaker and I have helped Summit County receive over $10 million in grants that are going into housing projects that are going to result in units being built. Initiatives like Proposition 123 that the voters just approved 2 years ago is going to result in $300 million a year in Colorado for more affordable housing development. Those have been issued their first round of grants over the last few months, and so that's exciting to see going to communities. We've done different bills like rental assistance to allow people to stay where they are. We worked with Commissioner Pogue this year, the Speaker and I, on Senate Bill 2, which is going to allow the commissioners to offer property tax relief to people who rent to a long-term worker instead of doing a short-term rental, things like that. We've seen some great local efforts as well. The town of Frisco on the Galena Street project, or their CDOT partnership right off of Main Street, that are building units. And I will say, I represent 10 counties in Senate District 8. Summit County is the leader, if not one of the 2 leaders in my Senate district on being proactive on building housing. But we need to do more. This is the #1 issue facing every constituent that I represent in every town that I represent, from ski towns like here in Summit County to rural communities like Craig and Meeker. Everybody is struggling with housing. We have to do more, but the state alone doesn't build housing. The county alone doesn't build housing. We need partnerships to come together, both financially and have the political will, as both Commissioner Mamula and Pogue mentioned. People need to stand up and say, yes, in my backyard. Yes, we need housing here now.
How did we, get the corporations involved in this, like Walmart, Safeway, and City Market? Where are these big corporations from? Breckenridge. I know we keep on approving Breckenridge Vacations, Homes, and all this with the Kindred Resort, Keystone, Miller Housing. All this big money coming in and making it harder for employees. I know when Whole Foods came here in Frisco, we're not taking any employees from anybody else because these people are moving from all over the country to come here because they want to be here. Well, that's freaking great. Where are they going to live? They still have to live somewhere. So the bullshit that they gave us is bullshit. Where are those people on the table? Where is Whole Foods? Where is
I think the important
Safeway?
thing is to get the municipalities to change building codes to enforce or force new building to provide housing. And you know, those are slow trying to grind through those. Grind
We
through
are
those
trying
things.
to build stuff to help them, though.
Believe
To
me.
help them have
I know.
employees
Listen,
to serve
we have a
us.
problem with the ski areas also.
Yeah, I
mean,
know.
You know, and every negotiation you go into, you know, Breck just finished the negotiation with Mike Dudek, and that's going to include a bunch of housing in this phase. But without the legislative piece that goes with that, they're hard to enforce. You know, people have property rights. These companies unfortunately have property rights, and they build what they have. And if it's not built into your code that you have to provide X amount of housing, it's hard to get through.
But
You know?
are we having a conversation with them to
Yes,
help?
absolutely.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are all municipalities. I mean,
Yeah.
every
I understand.
municipality is a little different. I mean, you've read the newspaper, what's going on in Dillon. You have a major developer there,
Shiny object.
shiny object. You know, there's a split on that council about what they should have to build, you know, which is honestly unfortunate. It's the community members in these communities that need to go to their municipalities and say, you've got to get these bigger companies to help.
So where was the county on the Kindred Resort? Where's their housing on it?
So the Keystone PUD does require that a developer like Kindred has to build housing.
Yep.
The way Kindred chose to solve that requirement was to actually master lease units. So they do have to provide a certain amount of housing for their employees. One of the challenges here is that counties can only do what the state tells us we can do. Right? We can't go out and impose an impact fee, for example, on a developer because the state has never given us that authority to do. And so Senator Roberts and I are starting to talk about how we might pass legislation that would allow us to hold those developers a little more accountable. But I do think one of the sort of differences you see in Summit County from some other counties is that every single one of our large employers that is actually based in Summit County has built housing, right? Centura, they built housing. Keystone Resort, they built housing. Breckenridge Resort, they built housing. Even the school district is now talking about building housing for their employees. So where the relationships are good, I think you see a lot of partnerships and a lot of large businesses that actually are doing right by their employees. I think what's difficult is when you have these big corporate companies that don't have any skin in the game locally, right? We don't have any authority to make them. The towns do, and that's why you see some examples of some of these developers being held accountable, but they just don't feel housing the same way we feel housing, right? It's easy for them to say, not my problem, let government figure it out. And again, that's one place where you all can help us. Because the more the managers can say to their corporate owners, hey, I can't hire employees and everyone's telling me we need to do more to solve this problem as a big corporation, that message is actually really effective with those guys. So I'd again ask you all to be our partners in trying to create some pressure to get these companies to do the right thing.
I forget this gentleman's name. My name's Christina Whalen. I'm a board member for SIS, which is staying in Summit. We have our president and several board members here. We too are completely invested in Lake Hill. The county is about to give us 1.25 acres to build 60 doors of senior assisted living, memory care, respite, and rehab. One of the things that I could recommend, and it happens in the evening, go to the Frisco town meetings. I personally feel that there's pushback on the project from them. They need to see faces, they need to see bodies. The county has been standing up for us in ways I can't even explain, but they've told us, you need to be there. You need to have a voice. So I know it's the middle of the day and people that work can't come to meetings in the middle of the day, but go to the evening meetings. They need to hear what you had to say. They need to hear lots of people say that. We feel the same way about our senior plan.
Letters work too.
Yep.
I mean, letter writing from you and your friends definitely works.
Emails.
Yeah. I mean emails, not mailing a letter.
I read emails.
The old guys.
We read emails.
Carrier pigeons.
Still using mail.
Yes, ma'am, in the back.
So I have a question about the strategy. I don't know a whole lot about what legislation has been done in the area. I just know that a lot of people have been very upset. We live over in Jefferson, kind of in Fairplay area, in our county. But just after hearing a lot of what's been going on here, I think one question I do have is what additional strategies have been put in place around creating more free market for this type of rental assistance, I suppose? Because to me, it seems like there's sort of a forced transaction and there's a lot of friction between different parties, right? Like forcing a company to provide housing when they're not really in the business of creating housing, or having this entire political thing around creating affordable housing, and this ADU situation where it's essentially rent controlled and it's not really a sound, to me, it doesn't look like a sound business decision to have a home and then have this ADU, and then amongst all of your neighbors who are having their properties go up, they're making money, and then you have this ADU and you can't, there's a lot of restrictions on it. And so I think one thing that I feel kind of concerned about with this, and concerned about generally with housing, that is with the government, the way that they put their hand in it, is it encourages a lot of issues with quality. I think that the whole slumlord situation can really happen. People aren't really incentivized to work on their properties. And so I'm curious about if there's a way to offer incentives for homeowners and building owners to provide housing at an open market rate where the people who are residents in the town or the county can compete at this rate, and it's like you elect to be a part of it. And then there's like an open competition inside of that where the people who are working decide how much they want to pay for an apartment, rather than Airbnb being the one who's dictating the prices of everything. And so that's just kind of my question, wondering if anybody's thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why first of all, here's one of the things about Summit County that fascinates me. There are 31,000 people that live in Summit County year-round, and there's 31,000 residential dwellings. So the math would tell you, in an open market economy that's functioning, there's enough houses for everybody, right? But that's not the way it works. There's a lot of reasons for that. First, only one out of every 4 homes in Summit County that sells every year is sold to a local, right? We have so much demand from outside of Summit County that it kind of wrecks that free market model. When you add to that how expensive it is to build in Summit County, when you add on to that how landlocked we are and how limited we are in terms of land, when you add on to that our water and sewer infrastructure is almost at 100% capacity, right, almost fully used, it becomes so expensive for that developer to build that house that it's not worth it. And so they just don't. Summit County lost its market affordable housing developers in the early 80s because of that. And we've never been able to figure out how to equalize that so that they want to come back, so that they can make a profit in Summit County. So then government has to step in, right? It becomes our burden to fix it. And we are also constrained, right? We're constrained by money. It goes back to that number, right? That Colorado local government is essentially the poorest in the nation because our property tax rates are the lowest in the nation. And there's only so much housing we can afford to build. So we don't solve that market inequity. We can't create enough supply to make the market function the way it needs to function. And so we have to protect our investment, or the public's investment, in these projects. And that's why we end up with things like deed restrictions or limiting the area median income of the individual that can live there. It's not a perfect solution, but I think it is very unlikely, because of all of our market constraints, that we ever get back to an environment where the free market actually functions. And until we can get to that point, it would be really difficult for Summit County government, for example, to build housing and not put those restrictions in place, because we don't want to perpetuate that model where only 1 of every 4 units we build actually goes to locals.
And I will chime in. Our bedroom communities of Leadville, Kremling, Fairplay, Park County, their challenges are this times 10, because they don't have the local property wealth to be able to either, drive some funding towards affordable housing projects. Certainly the capacity within those much smaller communities is limited. And so it's, as I represent Park County, Lake County, Grand County, we share Grand County, and we talk to those communities about the impacts of this local workforce living in those communities and the housing in those communities skyrocketing because of that demand. It is one of the bills we passed this year, Senate Bill 174, has a focus on a better regional and statewide approach to housing. How can we think about affordable housing in an interjurisdictional way? How can we do better housing assessment needs based on a regional perspective, not just a really narrow local municipal lens, but through that broader statewide or regional lens? And my hope is, Alex, I too want to, I have heard you speak before and ask these questions, and I realize that our progress does not, you're not feeling the progress. I know our communities are not feeling enough progress. It doesn't mean that we're not going to keep battling this. And to hear the number of units that Breckenridge has built, I don't know the total that have been built, 400 in your time. I want to say, across this state, there's been such a focus just these last 4 or 5 years that the number of affordable, affordable workforce housing units in the state has certainly grown. But we need to keep going, right? And even the $500 million some dollars that the state has put into affordable housing projects spread out across the state isn't having enough of an impact in each and every one of our communities. But thank you for the questions, and certainly happy to talk with you.
And I also think that in addition to that, the idea was when we first started affordable housing programs, rental programs, and deed restricted housing, was that that locals were supposed to be able to buy a house or enter affordable rental units, be able to save that money, and then eventually graduate into a market rate unit. But unfortunately, with what happened in COVID and just the skyrocketing of property values throughout the last 5 years, that has not been people are not able to graduate to the next step. So now we're stuck in this little grinder where people who need affordable housing now can't get into the affordable housing that exists. It's like the Hunger Games trying to get a housing through a lottery. It's getting more and more intense, and we are trying to now step forward and, okay, now we realize we need middle income housing, not just low income housing. And the middle income housing, let me tell you guys, that's a hard market to make housing work. We are every day, I have got a PhD in the last 6 months in trying to discover and learn how to finance affordable middle income housing. And it's not easy. And so it's not something that, I'll be completely frank with you, I don't own property in Summit County. I am a county commissioner, and it's the first time I've ever had one job in Summit County. Many of you don't know me as a commissioner. Many of you know me because I was waiting your tables or serving you beers for the last 10 years. And then I became a county commissioner, and I got a great new job, and I still couldn't afford to buy a condo in my salary. So don't think that this is not lost on every single one of us. We care deeply. We want to do something, but let me tell you something else. From moving from the restaurant world into government, this shit works slow. It takes time, and so I guess but it works slow for a reason. There is a process in order to do this and to do it the right way and to provide these affordable units to our residents. We have to take our time. We have to be very, very precision focused on how we do this so that we don't find ourselves 10, 15 years down the line in an even worse place. And so I think that's kind of, that speaking to the free market, I don't know, in corporations, I don't remember the last time a corporation has said out of the goodness of their hearts, they really want to help you. They really want to make money. And at the end of the day, affordable housing doesn't necessarily make as much money as other opportunities.
So our range of housing that's needed is significantly greater than most places in the state. So Front Range, they talk about housing the 30 to 60% of the area median income. we're talking about housing 30 to 200%. Because if you make 150 grand living in Summit County, you still can't afford a house. So our burden and what we try to work on is a much larger range, which makes it difficult because when the governor wants to do a housing program, or you want to get tax credits to build a housing program, you talk about that really needy piece when, man, in Summit County, there's a lot of needy. So, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, we don't have a ton of time. This has been a great housing panel, and hopefully you guys were okay with that. It's an important topic. I'll just hold 1 second, and then we'll have time for questions. If you guys want to come back to this, not a problem. I want to do a quick shout out. One of the county's mandated programs is public safety, obviously, and public safety's been in the news lately. A shout out to our fire districts, to our sheriff's office. We had a little blip of some dry weather, and last, I think it was, 2 weeks ago, had kind of what was known as a close call up near Breckenridge. The county funds public safety initiatives through unincorporated Summit County, that's the sheriff's office. Next, August 7th, we're going to do two things. One is an evacuation assessment. We've got a current evacuation plan which has run its course, and the county has contracted with an organization to redo their countywide evacuation assessment plan. That is about an 18-month project. We're partnering with the towns, obviously, and the police departments and the local municipalities and other first responders to update that. These guys, it's about a $400,000 contract. This is a big deal. As you guys know, when we get into fire season, we all start getting a little bit nervous about how the heck would we get out of here in case of something like that. So a shout out to our sheriff's office for taking this on. And then on August 7th, another public safety issue, the sheriff's office is leading, our Office of Emergency Management is leading a training on a public shooting event at the school. I'm sure you've heard much about this. They are looking for volunteers. There is a little bit of training involved with it, and we'll give you some contact information, or I'm happy to give you contact information on who to reach out to if you are interested in being a volunteer. This is countywide, again, in cooperation with the school district, the hospital, all the first responders, because as much as we love our bubble that we're in, sometimes it can get pierced. And these guys are focused on preparation. I don't know if you guys want to speak about what the efforts are at the state on wildfire, what else we're doing in public safety, but I'll hand that over to you guys as our next topic.
You guys want to start with wildfire?
Yeah, wildfire. So we represent Grand County, where the East Troublesome Fire was just a few short years ago, and since that time have invested tens of millions of dollars in mitigation efforts. Certainly in response, that includes aviation equipment, including the Firehawk helicopter, which we now in our possession is ready to fly. We have another one on the way that we anticipate will be ready for next fire season. I want to lift up, and I don't even want to see the show of hands, but I continue to hear from this community and others about the challenges to secure property insurance based on the wildfire threats. Last year, we passed a residential safety net insurance plan called the FAIR Plan. That will be available to homeowners come January for those individuals who cannot get regular property homeowners insurance through State Farm, American, whoever. That will be available January 1st. We also this year have commissioned a study to look at how we are going to protect our HOAs, our lodges, our condo hotels. Beaver Run Resort, I don't know if we have anybody here. Chris Pappas was a tremendous partner. Mike Dudick also stepped up to come and testify before the legislature about the incredible challenges they are facing just in securing insurance for their properties. Beaver Run was denied 22 times to get any sort of insurance for Beaver Run. They were able, I think, to cobble together pieces between a number of carriers to try and cover that property. But obviously, that is a significant outcome of the wildfires we've seen in the state and across the nation. To be honest, we're doing a study because we don't have an immediate fix. Carriers are telling us they don't know how to do this any differently. We're asking for help from the feds and hope to see that come. What else on wildfire?
Continuing to fund our mitigation programs, I think, is one of our biggest responsibilities in this field. We've seen the programs where the state gives money to counties that allows reimbursement to folks who do mitigation on their own property, as well as tax credits for people to do mitigation on their own property. We know that works. We know that is so fruitful in obviously preventing damage from wildfire, but also helping people lower their insurance rates a little bit when the insurance companies ask them to do that mitigation. Another bill that I was worked really hard on with folks like the Summit Fire District, the East Grand Fire District, was a bill we passed this year to allow fire districts to have access to more funding. They are going through an immense challenge, just like any other employer, with cost of materials, whether it's fire trucks or anything that they need. Also, of course, paying their employees and housing them. So we're hopeful that that bill will allow them to have more access to funding and really beef up our fire districts, particularly in rural areas.
Yeah, we put $5 million a year ago to rural districts, including ours, who had personal fire protective equipment that was decades old. They were using duct tape to hold their coats together. Absolutely unacceptable. That $5 million did not go far enough. I know that the need is greater. We've continued to maintain that $5 million each year investment. And I will say this year we enhanced benefits for our firefighters and law enforcement on the health front, because we know the stress and strain of the job, the dangers they face. The state needs to do more to help them when they face real health challenges or serious health concerns. So we stepped up and carried a bill to do just that.
One of the interesting things about the Breckenridge fire, the Excel put up a couple of cameras a couple of years ago that use AI to detect fire. The cameras detected the smoke from the fire above the Wellington neighborhood in Breckenridge before anybody called 911. It was incredible. So we have been talking about funding a handful more of those for around the county. They already have a bunch, but this new Pano AI technology is fascinating. And if we can use that as another tool to help us detect wildfire. And then also, we have a great partner in the U.S. Forest Service. They have really spent a lot of money in the county doing clear cutting and the things that they do, and there's been a lot of pushback in the community, and I get it. I got trails that I don't go on anymore either because they're clear cut, but those are for the health and safety of the community. And it's sort of a bummer to see those letters to the editor in the paper about how my favorite trail was just ruined. But there's a balance in this county between the safety of the people that live here and our enjoyment of the outdoors. And I think what the Forest Service has done here in particular has been noteworthy. They're fantastic partners with us, and I personally applaud the efforts. I mean, I don't love the clear cut thing either, but that's where we are.
Yeah, and on top of that, just to echo that, we work with the Wildfire Council, which is made up of the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, as well as our fire districts in the county, to secure grants and to provide grant funding to our residents, direct cash funding with a 50% match, to do your own home assessments and to also mitigate your pressures against wildfire. So that's been, we provided $700,000 in the last grant cycle, and we will continue to do that with providing funding through your voter ballot approved Strong Future funds. So that's another thing we're doing. And then as far as the ecology and our forest health, we are talking about looking into how it's going to affect not only our forest, but then also our watershed health. So the county is also partnering with some other local groups in order to move forward with a wildfire-ready watershed program. Because, of course, like what happened in the troublesome fire, the issue was not only did they suffer a massive wildfire, but then their watersheds and their water quality was affected by that. So we're looking forward to not only about what happens before a fire, but what happens after the fire to ensure that we have safe and quality drinking water in this community. So we're talking about it as a more holistic more holistic solutions rather than just cutting down trees.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to questions. We have room for a few. I know these guys have got schedules they need to keep. So you two in the front had your hand up, then Neil Groundwater in the back, and then we'll get to Sandy and Candy and Steve after that. So go ahead, sir.
So on public safety, this is not countywide. Highway 6 is dangerous. People from I-70 to Keystone are going 65 miles an hour. I know because I drive it all the time and they are flying past me. In order to get from the, whatever direction that is, the north side to the lake, you have to physically cross. There's no crosswalks. CDOT is proposing the same type of traffic circles that there are on Route 9. That's good. Their plan is 7 to 10 years. People will die in the next 7 to 10 years because there's a Summit stage stop right where you have to cross. You can't cross with a dog. You can't cross in a wheelchair. You cannot cross with a stroller. You cannot cross with a dog. I have almost been killed with my dog, but that was my fault because I thought I could outrun this. You know, that was a mistake. That was my mistake. My point is 7 to 10 years is too long. I think you have to have an interim solution that will provide some measure of safety. And maybe it is just a blinking light like they have down in Keystone. Maybe it's just drawing pedestrian crosswalks and have some sign up there that says, slow down, pedestrians cross here. I know CDOT is responsible, it's a state highway, it's their money, their time frame, their plan, whatever. But as commissioners, can't we do something in an interim so there is more ability to cross that safely?
So to reinforce the point, one of the issues with building crosswalks is that the speed limit along 6 is too high. So one of the things the county commissioners could support is a reduction in the speed limit along there, at least through Dillon. If we could get it to 35 or 40 miles an hour, we'd be able to do just that, a flashing crossing.
Something.
At the higher speed limit than it is now, you're not allowed to have a crossing like that.
I am delighted to give you all the contact for CDOT, and you can have this conversation with them, because I have had this conversation with them more times than I can hear. We have no authority on state highways. We have no authority to put up signs. We have no authority to do crosswalks. We have no authority to change the speed limit. And we have all had, all of us, conversations with CDOT about the problems that we are experiencing and have gotten nowhere. This 7 to 10 year process for funding state projects is also a source of great frustration to me, because you're right, like our population has changed so significantly in 7 to 10 years that we couldn't possibly have imagined the situation in which we now find ourselves. So this is incredibly frustrating to me. And it is one of those places where if I had a magic wand, I would fix it. But unfortunately, we as the county have no authority to fix these problems.
Can you guys do anything?
We have, and I was just asking the senator about a bill we passed in 2020, 21, Senate Bill 260. We have been so bad in this state in funding infrastructure, particularly our roads and bridges. And we let it go for far too long. We took ballot measures to the voters that were not supported for tax increases. In 21, we passed Senate Bill 260. We had a $9 billion shortfall then on transportation projects. 260 ultimately brings us $5.4 billion, but that's over the course of many years. So we don't have those dollars yet. I will tell you that transportation, our roads come up in every single community I visit. And certainly this one has been a conversation. I would have to go back and revisit, so let's follow up after today, what the latest conversations have been about speed limits out there. It has to do with highway, like even if you reduce the speed limit, people are not going to slow down, and so it's not ultimately
Well, but
the
it's
solution.
something.
But it is something, and I don't disagree. I mean, look at the crosswalk we have in Keystone. That we still have
Razor Drive.
accidents. People still, all the flashing lights, and that is still such a challenge. Razor Drive.
And I would just, CDOT is governed by a board of commissioners, and Summit County has a new CDOT commissioner, so let's get them looped in on this. And they're often the ones that can
So
push
who
for
do
a
I follow
project.
up with?
Me.
Okay,
Yeah.
Us.
Yeah,
We'll connect you with.
The two of us.
Please.
Yeah,
That's
Okay.
another one where the emails would be amazing.
yeah. Neil, real quick.
This is about the last subject, but there was a meeting last night with Water in the West, it's over at Highside Brewery. A number of the stakeholders were there. It was about water quality, which Commissioner Waters mentioned. Groundwater, not-
Yeah,
But,
give it all.
and fires, and about the PANO-AI success. And those things are not cheap, but every time you respond to a fire, that costs money. And if you get an earlier recognition of a fire,
They're a lot cheaper than replacing an entire neighborhood.
well, they're cheaper than bringing red, white, and blue or some fire
100%.
for an extended period. That's all I got to say. There's a lot going on in the area.
Thanks, Neil. Candy, real quick.
Back to the fire mitigation, the Wolverines that you've introduced, how is that, because it's a beaver run, family, and are they going to kind of get to the pine beetle trees that, a part of like the clear cut and the fire mitigation? And then the second question was, what are we doing to really educate folks that come into our community about dusting out those fires? Like, there's a little bit of information, but there could be more public information, like this is what you need to make sure those fires around that campground is out, so that doesn't happen like it did in Lund.
And I can respond to that. Our communications team is working with the school district and everybody across the county to reach out to our various stakeholders to really get that message across. We believe that in the Wellington neighborhood, it was likely kids from the area because it was very much just above the neighborhood and kind of off the beaten path from a tourist spot. So that is something that we continue to work on, and we will do, because that's a great point. Steve, real quick, and then I got to get to this gentleman, and if we have time, because we are over, I want to make sure then we can get to you, Sandy. But how are you guys doing for a few more minutes? Or you?
I have 5.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Steve.
Just to get back to the fire mitigation, we spend a lot of time and money on what to do after a fire started. And to your point, some energy should put into keeping the fires from starting, particularly in dispersed camping areas like Miners Creek or perhaps Boreas Pass. Easy solution, there's a gate, close the frickin' gate when fire danger is high. It's not difficult, but you gotta work with the Forest Service.
That's right.
And they're not been happy with me.
I gotta tell you, our problem's really not even when the danger is high. I think there's a general awareness. Our problem is when the danger is low, and you have a wind event like you had above the Wellington. There's a ton of saturation in the forest right now, at least when that fire started. Doesn't stop a fire from starting. It's really more about education and people not leaving a fire unattended.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
So the solution is no fires.
I agree. The Forest Service does not agree with that.
But this relationship you think is so good.
Well,
it's
like every relationship, it's good in some places. And
There's gates, it's so easy. You close the
Yeah.
gate, it's not that hard, you guys. And it's a lot cheaper than all these other things, the clear cutting and the...
We have an ongoing internal, not only us, but all the municipalities about, if it was up to me, the minute summer started, there'd be a fire ban.
I'm with you.
The Forest Service and the Sheriff's Office do not agree because there's science and data behind what they do. Me, I'd rather nobody start a fire in the wilderness. The people that actually own the land don't necessarily agree with that. So, but we keep talking about it.
Good, thanks.
Yes, sir.
I think we're on the same page.
Thank you. A little bit of a different topic. I am a second homeowner. I've been a second homeowner for 24 years. My principal home is Cincinnati. We've never had a vote on anything. I'm told by your assessor that only 33% of the tax bills go out to Summit County residents. I live in Keystone. Last fall, they had a referendum on whether to become a municipality. I'm told that 70% of Keystone residents are living in second homes and probably paying at least 80% of the property taxes. And I'm asking you guys to change the law, whatever the law, change the law so that Summit County residents can vote on Summit County issues. I pay my taxes, but I don't have a vote on anything.
You do, if you change your voter registration to here, you can vote here. You just
I
can't vote
do
in
that.
both
My home is
places.
Cincinnati.
Well, you
Yeah,
can-
that's
you
a
can-
federal, that is a constitutional issue, right? Because the issue, it's a constitutional issue. It's an issue with the US Constitution, not something that we handle
Well, you
here.
guys as commissioners could
No,
pass some
we cannot.
legislation.
We can't.
Absolutely not.
No,
can't?
no, it
So
would,
2/3 of your residents are not able to vote.
they
can-
vote,
can
you
change.
can vote
Residents
elsewhere,
can't even live
right?
here because it's
You
like-
only get one vote.
You get
In
one
this
vote.
nation, you get
I'm
one
only
vote.
asking about Summit County
not-
issues.
that's-
It's not something,
not how it-
it's the national constitution that governs that one.
So Sandy, real quick, our last question, then we gotta let these guys go. I just wanted, before you start.
I-70 in winter.
Oh, yeah.
Right now,
Not so functional.
not so functional, and my suggestion is, let's go back and let's start assigning points on people's driving licenses, which the truck lobby kiboshed. But let's put it to a public vote that if you get ticketed on there, you're gonna pay more in insurance, and then they're gonna be more, because their companies will pay the $1,000. I mean, that's nothing to them. But for a
Senator
driver to
Roberts is
get
our
points,
resident expert on this topic.
for a driver to get points on a record that increases their insurance premiums, that makes a difference. But the trucking lobby ain't gonna make that happen through the legislature. I think it's the public response to make, I think it would be overwhelmingly positive to assign points to drivers that are driving without chains in the middle of winter.
So some good news here. Over the last 2 sessions, we've passed legislation about commercial vehicles on I-70 and other mountain passes. Last year, the speaker and I worked on a bill to increase the fines for speeding on steep grades. So that would include coming to and down from the tunnel, Vail Pass, et cetera. Which we worked with the trucking industry on, and they didn't oppose that one as much. This year, I worked on a bill, Senate Bill 100, that was very opposed by them at the beginning. But we got it passed. What Senate Bill 100 is now law, and what that means is that commercial vehicles have to carry chains at all times from September 1st to May 31st on I-70 and many mountain passes. It also puts in place that commercial vehicles cannot enter the left lane on very challenging parts of I-70. I'll go east to west. Floyd Hill, Georgetown Hill, to and from the tunnel, Vail Pass, down Junction, Glenwood
What
Cave.
are the consequences to the driver?
And we
It's
increase-
only $1,000, it's nothing.
So we've had the conversation between, do we raise the fines or do we raise the points? There is significant pushback to raising the points, obviously from the trucking companies, but it's also a workforce issue, because if you reach a certain number of points, you lose your license, you lose your job.
Well, then-
We need to work with
carry
the...
chains.
Right, I said we just passed the law to require them. Sandy, we passed the law to require
Personal
them.
responsibility.
We did that, Sandy. We passed the law. I just said Senate Bill 100 requires them to carry chains.
Yeah, but if they don't carry chains, what do they get? $1,000 fine?
They get significantly more fines. It's usually, obviously, the trucking company that will pay that fine, so they're going to be on the hook for this. But there's more to do. We need your help, as you mentioned. The trucking industry is a powerful lobby, but they're a big part of our economy too, and it's finding the right balance. I'm just as frustrated as everybody. We have to drive to the Capitol and spend as much time on it as anybody here. We know that it's terrible, and it can be improved. We're hoping that this bill will help improve it a little bit, but there's a lot more to do, including...
We did also close a loophole that would have allowed truckers, the drivers, not to have a CDL license.
Yes.
And that had happened because of a bill we passed last year. We fixed that this year. A CDL license is required by anyone driving a semi. So That was very problematic last year. I am so sorry that we have to end.
Nope.
I think we should do it
Thank you
again.
guys very much.
My contact information is up here. We did